Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel, and thanks for tuning in. This is an educational channel, and we look at great theories and discoveries and concepts that are vital to your physical, mental, spiritual health, but they've been suppressed, and so you probably don't know about them, and if you do, you probably don't know much about them. Requires a fair amount of digging to get into some of this, and some of the material is fairly difficult. And so I try to kind of hold your hand through this. Having gone down many blind alleys myself, I'm just trying to make it a little bit easier for you, although you have to do the work yourself. This is our 333rd Bible Decode, and we've looked at the Bible from a number of different angles, but right now we're kind of using the deist lens, and the deists were a group of mostly intellectuals, but a lot of common people as well, from the 16th, really 17th, 18th century, even early 19th century. And there is an organization still today, but just much less prominent, I guess. And the deists basically believe in one God, but that one God is not the author of any books. All those books, the Testaments and the Quran, are written by humans. The Book of God, or the Word of God, is the creation itself, and God gave us reason in order to behold God's creation. And that is how we can come to know God and the rules of God and the laws of God and the ethics of being a good person. And so many of the founders of the United States were deists, including arguably the first 5 presidents: Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, and several others, including Benjamin Franklin, and the author we're looking at today, Thomas Paine, who was also the author of the pamphlet Common Sense. Came out in 250 years ago, in early January 1776, and was a big catalyst for the Declaration of Independence 6 months later. This book came out, this book here that we're looking at, The Age of Reason, came out much later in 1793, and this was when he was living in France, stoking to a certain extent this French Revolution, and he was actually finished the writing just hours before he was imprisoned, and he thought he was going to get his head chopped off, but he survived and got back to the States, where he died in 1809. We are about to start chapter 15 of this book, which is called The Advantages. Let me make sure that we're at the right spot here. Yeah, I believe so here. Okay, about to start chapter 15, which is called Advantages of the Existence of Many Worlds in Each Solar System. Okay, so that is one of the main ways the deist tried to behold our creation is looking through their telescopes and seeing the regularity of the heavenly bodies, how you could predict things from them, and like eclipses and risings, not to mention astrology, um, and also through the microscope. You can see the regularities and the geometries of the microscopic particles. These are all things that the deists of the time were keen on. And in this last chapter, Thomas Paine talks about how he bought a set of globes and a orrery. And an orrery is a kind of a scale model of the solar system with all of the rotations and revolutions being at scale. Okay. It is an idea I have never lost sight of, that all our knowledge of science is derived from the revolutions exhibited to our eye, and from thence to our understanding, which those several planets or worlds of which our system is composed make in their circuit round the sun. Had then the quantity of matter which these 6 worlds contain been blended into one solitary globe, the consequence to us would have been that either no revolutionary motion would have existed, or not a sufficiency of it to give us the ideas and the knowledge of science we now have. And it is from the sciences that all the mechanical arts that contribute so much to our earthly felicity and comfort are derived. As therefore the Creator made nothing in vain, so also must it be believed that he organized the structure of the universe in the most advantageous manner for the benefit of man. And as we see, and from experience feel, the benefits we derive from the structure of the universe, formed as it is, with which benefits we should not have had the opportunity of enjoying if the structure, so far as relates to our system, had been a solitary globe. We can discover at least one reason why a plurality of worlds has been made, and that reason calls forth the devotional gratitude of man, as well as his admiration. But it is not to us, the inhabitants of this globe only, that the benefits arising from a plurality of worlds are limited. The inhabitants of each of the worlds of which our system is composed enjoy the same opportunities of knowledge as we do. They behold the revolutionary motions of our earth as we behold theirs. All the planets revolve in sight of each other, and therefore the same universal school of science presents itself to all. Neither does the knowledge stop here. The system of worlds next to us exhibits in its revolutions the same principles and school of science to the inhabitants of their system as our system does to us, and in like manner throughout the immensity of space. Our ideas, not only of the almightiness of the Creator, but of his wisdom and beneficence, become enlarged in proportion as we contemplate the extent and structure of the universe. The solitary idea of a solitary world, rolling or at rest in the immense ocean of space, gives place to the cheerful idea of a society of worlds, so happily contrived as to administer, even by their motion, instruction to man. We see our own earth filled with abundance, but we forget to consider how much of that abundance is owing to the scientific knowledge the vast machinery of the universe has unfolded. Okay, that's the end of chapter 15. Chapter 16 is called Application of the Preceding to the System of the Christian. But in the midst of those reflections, what are we to think of the Christian system of faith that forms itself upon the idea of only one world, and that of no greater extent, as is before shown, than 25,000 miles, an extent which a man walking at the rate of 3 miles an hour for 12 hours in the day, could he keep on in a circular direction, would walk entirely around in less than 2 years. Alas, what is this to the mighty ocean of space and the almighty power of the Creator? From whence then could arise the solitary and strange conceit that the Almighty, who had millions of worlds equally dependent on his protection, should quit the care of all the rest and come to die in our world? Because they say, one man and one woman had eaten an apple. And on the other hand, are we to suppose that every world in the boundless creation had an Eve, an apple, a serpent, and a Redeemer? In this case, the person who is irreverently called the Son of God, and sometimes God himself, would have nothing else to do than to travel from world to world in an endless succession of death, with scarcely a momentary interval of life. It has been by rejecting the evidence that the Word or works of God in the creation affords to our senses, and the action of our reason upon that evidence, that so many wild and whimsical systems of faith and of religion have been fabricated and set up. There may be many systems of religion that, so far from being morally bad, are in many respects morally good, but there can be but one that is true, and that one necessarily must, as it ever will, be in all things consistent with the ever-existing Word of God that we behold in his works. But such is the strange construction of the Christian system of faith, that every evidence the heavens affords to man either directly contradicts it or renders it absurd. It is possible to believe, and I always feel pleasure in encouraging myself to believe it, that there have been men in the world who persuaded themselves that what is called a pious fraud might, at least under particular circumstances, be productive of some good. But the fraud being once established could not afterwards be explained, for it is with a pious fraud as with a bad action. It begets a calamitous necessity of going on. The persons who first preached the Christian system of faith, and in some measure combined with it the morality preached by Jesus Christ, might persuade themselves that it was better than the heathen mythology that then prevailed. From the first preachers, the fraud went on to the second and to the third, till the idea of its being a pious fraud became lost in the belief of its being true. And that belief became again encouraged by the interest of those who made a livelihood by preaching it. But though such a belief might, by such means, be rendered almost general among the laity, it is next to impossible to account for the continual persecution carried on by the Church for several hundred years against the sciences and against the professors of science. if the church had not some record or tradition that it was originally no other than a pious fraud, or did not foresee that it could not be maintained against the evidence that the structure of the universe afforded. All right, that is the end of chapter 16. Chapter 17 is called Of the Means Employed in All Time and Almost Universally to Deceive the Peoples. I guess that's it. To deceive the peoples. Having thus shown the irreconcilable inconsistencies between the real Word of God existing in the universe and that which is called the Word of God, as shown to us in a printed book that any man might make, I proceed to speak of the three principal means that have been employed in all ages and perhaps in all countries to impose upon mankind. Those three means are mystery, miracle, and prophecy. The first two are incompatible with true religion, and the third ought always to be suspected. With respect to mystery, everything we behold is, in one sense, a mystery to us. Our own existence is a mystery. The whole vegetable world is a mystery. We cannot account how it is that an acorn, when put into the ground, is made to develop itself and become an oak. We know not how it is that the seed we sow unfolds and multiplies itself, and returns to us such an abundant interest for so small a capital. The fact, however, as distinct from the operating cause, is not a mystery, because we see it, and we know also the means we are to use, which is no other than putting the seed in the ground. We know, therefore, as much as is necessary for us to know, and that part of the operation that we do not know, and which, if we did, we could not perform, the Creator takes upon himself and performs it for us. We are therefore better off than if we had been let into the secret and left to do it for ourselves. But though every created thing is, in this sense, a mystery, the word mystery cannot be applied to moral truth, and more than obscurity can be applied to light, any more than obscurity can be applied to light. The God in whom we believe is a God of moral truth, and not a God of mystery or obscurity. Mystery is the antagonist of truth. It is a fog of human invention that obscures truth and represents it in distortion. Truth never envelops itself in mystery, and the mystery in which it is at any time enveloped is the work of its antagonist and never of itself. Religion, therefore, being the belief of a God and the practice of a moral truth, cannot have a connection with mystery. The belief of a God, so far from having anything of mystery in it, is of all beliefs the most easy, because it arises to us, as is before observed, out of necessity. And the practice of moral truth, or in other words, a practical imitation of the moral goodness of God, is no other than our acting towards each other as he acts benignly towards all. We cannot serve God in the manner we serve those who cannot do without such service. And therefore, the only idea we can have of serving God is that of contributing to the happiness of the living creation that God has made. This cannot be done by retiring ourselves from the society of the world and spending a recluse life in selfish devotion. The very nature and design of religion, if I may so express it, prove even to demonstration that it must be free from everything of mystery and unencumbered with everything that is mysterious. Religion, considered as a duty, is incumbent upon every living soul alike, and therefore must be on a level to the understanding and comprehension of all. Man does not learn religion as he learns the secrets and mysteries of a trade. He learns the theory of religion by reflection. It arises out of the action of his own mind upon the things which he sees, or upon what he may happen to hear or to read, and the practice joins itself thereto. When men, whether from policy or pious fraud, set up systems of religion incompatible with the word or works of God in the creation, and not only above but repugnant to human comprehension, they were under the necessity of inventing or adopting a word that should serve as a bar to all questions, inquiries, and speculations. The word mystery answered this purpose, and thus it has happened that religion, which is in itself without mystery, has been corrupted into a fog of mysteries. As mystery answered all general purposes, miracle followed as an occasional auxiliary. The former served to bewilder the mind, the latter to puzzle the senses. One was the lingo, the other the legerdemain. But before going further into this subject, it will be proper to inquire what is to be understood by a miracle. In the same sense that everything may be said to be a mystery, so also may it be said that everything is a miracle, and that no one thing is a greater miracle than another. The elephant, though larger, is not a greater miracle than a mite, nor a mountain a greater miracle than an atom. To an almighty power, it is no more difficult to make the one than the other, and no more difficult to make a million of worlds than to make one. Everything, therefore, is a miracle in one sense, whilst in the other sense, there is no such thing as a miracle. It is a miracle when compared to our power and to our comprehension. It is not a miracle compared to the power that performs it. But as nothing in this description conveys the idea that is affixed to the word miracle, it is necessary to carry the inquiry further. Mankind have conceived to themselves certain laws by which what they call nature is supposed to act, and that a miracle is something contrary to the operation and effect of those laws. But unless we know the whole extent of those laws and of what are commonly called the powers of nature, we are not able to judge whether anything that may appear to us wonderful or miraculous be within or be beyond or be contrary to her natural power of acting. The ascension of man several miles high into the air would have everything in it that constitutes the idea of a miracle, if it were not known that a species of air can be generated several times lighter than the common atmospheric air, and yet possess elasticity enough to prevent the balloon in which that light air is enclosed from being compressed into as many times less bulk by the common air that surrounds it. In like manner, extracting flashes or sparks of fire from the human body as visibly as from a steel strut with a flint, and causing iron or steel to move without any visible agent, would also give the idea of a miracle. If we were not acquainted with electricity and magnetism, so also would many other experiments in natural philosophy to those who are not acquainted with the subject. The restoring persons to life who are to appearance dead, as is practiced upon drowned persons, would also be a miracle. If it were not known that animation is capable of being suspended without being extinct. Besides these, there are performances by sleight of hand and by persons acting in concert that have a miraculous appearance, which, when known, are thought nothing of. And besides these, there are mechanical and optical deceptions. There is now an exhibition in Paris of ghosts or specters, which, though it is not imposed upon the spectators as a fact, has an astonishing appearance. As therefore we know not the extent to which either nature or art can go, there is no criterion to determine what a miracle is, and mankind, in giving credit to appearances under the idea of their being miracles, are subject to be continually imposed upon. Since then, appearances are so capable of deceiving, and things not real have a strong resemblance to things that are. Nothing can be more inconsistent than to suppose that the Almighty would make use of means, such as are called miracles, that would subject the person who performed them to the suspicion of being an impostor, and the person who related them to be suspected of lying, and the doctrine intended to be supported thereby to be suspected as a fabulous invention. Of all the modes of evidence that ever were invented to obtain belief to any system or opinion to which the name of religion has been given, that of miracle, however successful the imposition may have been, is the most inconsistent. For in the first place, whenever recourse is had to show, for the purpose of procuring that belief, it implies a lameness or weakness in the doctrine that is preached. And in the second place, it is degrading the Almighty into the character of a showman, playing tricks to amuse and make the people stare and wonder. It is also the most equivocal sort of evidence that can be set up, for the belief is not to depend upon the thing called a miracle, but upon the credit of the reporter who says that he saw it, and therefore the thing, were it true, would have no better chance of being believed than if it were a lie. Suppose I were to say that when I sat down to write this book, a hand presented itself in the air, took up the pen, and wrote every word that is herein written. Would anybody believe me? Certainly they would not. Would they believe me a whit the more if the thing had been a fact? Certainly they would not. Since then, a real miracle, were it to happen, would be subject to the same fate as the falsehood. The inconsistency becomes the greater of supposing the Almighty would make use of means that would not answer the purpose for which they were intended, even if they were real. If we are to suppose a miracle to be something so entirely out of the course of what is called nature, then that she must go out of that course to accomplish it. And we see an account given of such a miracle by the person who said he saw it, raises a question in the mind very easily decided, which is it more probable that nature should go out of her course, or that a man should tell a lie? We have never seen in our time nature go out of her course. out of her course, but we have good reason to believe that millions of lies have been told in the same time. It is therefore at least millions to one that the reporter of a miracle tells a lie. The story of the whale swallowing Jonah, though a whale is large enough to do it, borders greatly on the marvelous, but it would have approached nearer to the idea of a miracle if Jonah had swallowed the whale. In this, which may serve for all cases of miracles, the matter would decide itself as before stated, namely, is it more probable that a man should have swallowed a whale or told a lie? But suppose that Jonah had really swallowed the whale and gone with it in his belly to Nineveh, and to convince the people that it was true, have cast it up in their sight of the full length and size of the whale. Would they not have believed him to have been the devil instead of a prophet? Or if the whale had carried Jonah to Nineveh and cast him up in the same public manner, would they not have believed the whale to have been the devil and Jonah one of his imps? The most extraordinary of all the things called miracles related in the New Testament is that of the devil flying away with Jesus Christ and carrying him up to the top of a high mountain and to the top of the highest pinnacle of the temple and showing him and promising to him all the kingdoms of the world. How happened it that he did not discover America? Or is it only with kingdoms that his sooty highness has any interest? I have too much respect for the moral character of Christ to believe that he told this whale of a miracle himself. Neither is it easy to account for what purpose it could have been fabricated, unless it were to impose upon the connoisseurs of miracles, as is sometimes practiced upon the connoisseurs of Queen Anne's farthings and collectors of relics and antiquities, to render the belief of miracles ridiculous by outdoing miracle as Don Quixote outdid chivalry, or to embarrass the belief of miracles by making it doubtful by what power, whether of God or of the devil, anything called a miracle was performed. It requires, however, a great deal of faith in the devil to believe this miracle. In every point of view in which those things called miracles can be placed and considered, the reality of them is improbable